Hi.
Hi.
Look where I am.
I know I've been watching. I'm like,
Oh,
that's my
you get.
window.
I know. Yeah, you'll have to share it with me today. I thought it was only appropriate, though.
It's perfect.
How
Look at
about
those
you?
plants. I'm doing good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I thought it was appropriate because how long ago was it? Just, well, like 4 months ago? Yeah,
Gosh,
end of
that feels a
January,
long
right?
time. Yeah. 4 months.
Um,
Ooh, that went by.
that did go by. Um, that you filmed. I wouldn't call it a video. I would call it a film odyssey of sorts.
I like Film Odyssey.
You can use film odyssey. Um, right here, you had. I could use a little bit of hair and makeup. You had some.
We had a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's like a good place to start if you want to dive in of just, what was the inspiration for creating that film, which, as I understand it, it envelops or encompasses a whole series of songs and videos that you wrote and conceived that tells a bigger story. So,
hmm
can you let us in on that?
Yeah. Um, well, first of all, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
It's good to see that window again. That I've seen so much since then. Um,
Yeah, because this was a labor of love. I heard you describe it in your Instagram post, and I didn't realize how much post production you personally got into. So this is an epic. This is a hero's story.
yes, I had no idea I was getting into, but I guess that's how the hero's journey starts.
Right.
I just didn't know it was going to be all this. um, well, it started with I have an album that I put out last February called Worthy, and the first single from that album was called That Magic. And so there's That Magic, Steady Love, Crazy, and Sacred Space. And it we had the idea of just telling the story of a relationship arc. So in That Magic, they meet, and it's when everything's all sparkly and fresh and sparks and everything. And then Steady Love, they move in together, and you see them fight and make up and work on their relationship and get engaged and stuff. And it's not exactly linear because I had different leading men and stuff, but the arc. And then we had Crazy, which if you listen to the lyrics of the song, it's really about how it really feels to be in a relationship, like the every day. And then Sacred Space, I I added this song to the Crazy video because it's my favorite one on the album. It's all of my friends who are like musicians and spiritual people. It's their favorite one. It was like a special moment in every concert, so I had to find a way to get what I felt my music deserved. And so I work with a wonderful company called BMG, and so they gave me a budget and a half so that I could add Sacred Space. And I was a little bit nervous about that because we were trying to find a way to put visuals to something that's really ethereal. For me, Sacred Space, the song is very ethereal. But I think what I have learned about images is that sometimes it's not about what you see on the screen, but how you see it on the screen. And so Crazy is very colorful and bright with a lot of light beams. And, you see the couple inside of spaces and being together and laying in hammock and nature. And Sacred Space looks like you're in a dream. It like has like um, a sheen over it, light beams coming off of the skin and fog and dreaminess and glowing white clothes and all this stuff. It looks like a dream. And so um, for me, Crazy and Sacred Space is the continuation of that story where it's like, even though you found some place where you want to be, what else is there? Sometimes questions come up. And also for me in my own journey, I think I'm talking about like, I think this is very common. In fact, I think this is the point of relationships, actually. There are things that you never know about yourself until you discover them in a relationship, of course. And so that's kind of what Sacred Space represents as well. And there's a lot of symbolism, and people are telling me things that they see it because it's a little bit open. which I love. And also we had Reverend Michael Beckwith.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, we were making 2 music videos, but I saw how they could be combined into a short film. And Reverend Michael, we went back to him. He was on set, of course. We went back to him to ask if he would just speak. And I had the pleasure of editing his words in my Pro Tools. And I chose a segment where he says at the end, "Welcome home, and from here you shall not move." And that's why I named the short film Welcome Home. And in parentheses, Crazy Sacred Space.
Hmm.
And so I had a heavy hand in editing the visuals. I did Reverend Michael's spoken word. I did all of his. And in the end, the outcome is a vision a little bit different than what we had when we were on set, and a little bit different than the director had, which is why I had to stick my hand in, because I was like, this is not what I envisioned. And you didn't ask me this, but I'm wondering if this could possibly be my last videos, like, or something. I don't know, but I'm not in that conventional music business album cycle thing anymore. And so I don't know. And so I put everything I had into these because I wanted them to, for once, truly capture my energy. So we did real yoga asana on camera and real meditation on camera. And I picked men who look like the kind of men I would look at twice on the street, not models.
I
So
looked at them twice too, just if that
they
means
were
anything.
they
They're
were some
beautiful
handsome
men.
men. They are. And I asked, let your silver hair show. They were like, okay. So
Yeah. No, I mean, it shows the heart and the soul shines through. And I can see why you might consider not doing another video. I mean, I hope you do, and I know that your fans hope you do, but I can
thank
also
you.
understand why this might represent some form of like alloying or a culmination of a lot of different parts of your life.
Yes.
Obviously, the musician, the poet, the writer, the creative, the editor, I guess, in this particular case, or co-editor, but also very much the spiritual side of you that I know because we've gotten to know each other a bit, and that you've always projected that, but I think now it's come into like full culmination or full manifestation. Like I feel it. I mean, it's not oblique. I mean, the first shot of the video, you're sitting in front of a Buddha
Yeah.
meditating. So you're
Yeah.
right out there now.
Yeah. I think that over these last years, I would consider the music to be the sugar that makes the medicine go down. And so I would hide a lot of my spirituality in the music and literally just hide it. um, excuse me, I'm pushing through some stuff today. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, take your time.
um, the more I mature, the less tolerance I have for hiding anything. I mean, there are things that are private, but that's different from hiding. And so with this video, I just wanted to continue the process of coming out even further about who I am and how I live and what I believe. And I went through that process with my songwriting starting in 2009, where I just was like, I trained myself to stop being afraid to say certain things in my songwriting.
Yeah.
And now I'm training myself to not be afraid of certain things in my public persona and how I am in the world. I just want to be
Right.
all of it.
Yeah. Can I share with you my first spiritual connection with your music?
Yes.
Because I've always been a fan, and
Thank you.
driving, with the windows down, pumping the tunes, and that level of fan.
Thank
But
you.
but I think it was in 2016. I was going through some really significant personal change in my life, and I was we were in LA, and it was live. I think it was at Oprah hosts the Super Soul sessions,
Oh,
and and you gave a solo live performance on the campus at UCLA, and I was cowering in the back. I was not in like a great place, to be honest with you.
mhm.
And you sang "I Am Light," just you with your guitar. Um, those lyrics, I try to remember, like, I'm not the things my family did. I have
Yeah,
some of them written. I'm not the voices in my head.
yeah. I'm not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I was going through this moment where I was just changing courses in life, but I was so highly identified through my job, the approval of others, what I thought, what other people thought of me, and I just had a moment there connecting with your music that I was able to separate kind of the divine part of me, my divine nature, from
Mhm.
my ego, and say, no, 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 I'm not all these other things. And on some level I intellectually knew that, but I felt it for the first time there in that theater. And when you wrote that song, because in a lot of ways I feel like that song has become incredibly emblematic of your music, and I think people's relationship with that song is so deep. And I was reading the YouTube comments on the video, and it's like it's heavy. There's some real emotional stuff. Did you have any sense for the impact that song would have on people when you wrote it?
No, and I'm even surprised to hear your story.
Hmm.
Um, I, for me, songwriting is a spiritual work, like an actual spiritual work. I pray for my songs. I think I meditate over them. I pray intentions into them, like literally out loud. And so the day that I wrote I Am Light, it was 12/21/12, which everybody was waiting for.
Hmm.
And so I just thought, I should write something today. And I prayed a really big prayer over it that was almost seemed like ridiculous to ask for. I was just like, I want this to touch anybody. I don't remember exactly, but I remember feeling like, should I say this? I wanted to touch anybody who has felt any kind of pain that they thought they couldn't make it through, or anything that felt so heavy they didn't know what to do with, or, things I've always often felt. And, but I don't ever know that those things are answered, because I also say, may God's perfect will be done. I might be asking for something that's not needed or necessary or whatever. Um, and also, when I wrote the song, I thought the words "I am light" were kind of corny.
Yeah.
I am light. Like, it sounds like a stereotype of a spiritual person in a movie. But when I get myself into that place where I am allowing the music to emerge and I'm not trying to force it out, I trust what I hear. That's why I get myself in, like, I pray and meditate first and get myself into a place where I'm not judging anything. And so I trust what I hear. And so I'm like, this is what I hear. And I wrote a song around it. And when it was done, so often songs are not done the same day, often. But this one took a few hours. And when it was done, I just thought it was really beautiful and special. And I thought that it captured, um, in a simple way, the heaviness of what it feels like to be human. Because it's easy to write a song with a lot of words and a lot of verses. It's hard to write a song that's a simple truth.
Yeah.
And for me, I felt like I had captured that, because I have a lot of, um, you heard because what I call it is my song versation. That's what I did at UCLA that day, where I speak and sing. And in that, I talked about the domestic violence in my family life and my history of abuse, and like, but I don't say that in I Am Light. But I do say I'm not the things my family did. to be able to um, crystallize it in a simple way, that is what songwriting is. And so I felt when it was done that I had achieved that, like a good song, and it also was, it's told my perfect truth. But I also had this training from being in the music industry that was like, if it's not a single, it's not valuable.
Yeah.
Because I knew this song was never going to get played on the radio. It's not that kind of song. But what I
Right.
always forget, and what I Am Light has taught me, is that there are so many other places that music lives other than the radio, which is people's hearts. And so I Am Light surprised me because I accidentally made an album that was too long. The album was called Songversation. It had too many songs because somebody at the label told me we needed extra songs for Target and da-da-da. But they didn't tell me I had to put them all on every album. So I couldn't get them off. And it made me mad because I worked on the album so hard, then it's not what I meant, right? So it's accidentally too long. But even inside of that, I Am Light still rose to the top, and people kept sending me messages about that song. And it was the last song on the album, so they listened. And so it all surprised me. I did not think it was going to be this way. I thought it was corny in the beginning, but it is the only song of mine that I listen to often. I don't ever listen to my music. Like, it'll be so long, I think, look how high my voice was. And I sound so young, and I don't listen to myself, but I listen to I Am Light all the
Yeah.
time. I listen to it today.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously a kind of a meditative component, how just even how the song starts, that your shoulders just drop and your
Mm,
breathing just becomes easy. And it's interesting that you say that your first kind of impression of your own work was maybe a little bit corny, but I think it's the distillation of all of these complicated conceptual and intellectual thoughts into something so simple that can be delivered by a messenger like you. And that's the rare piece, because I would say, like Eckhart Tolle, I think he was actually there the same day at UCLA.
yes, he
And
was. I forgot about that.
and he just sat down in his stage setup is very Spartan. He just has a chair in the middle, and he'll walk on stage and sit in the middle of the chair and say nothing for a good 10 minutes. And just saying nothing is arresting enough until everybody quiets down. And he will also just say, I am. But when he says it, it lands. And I suppose that is the hallmark of a transcendent messenger, is that you can distill these ideas into something so simple and have them resonate so deeply. So I think
Thank
that's what you
you.
did.
Thank you.
Um, I am curious about your creative process, and I'll tie it into Sacred Space, because I know that that song, well, what do I know? I don't know anything. But I sense that that song is not literal, that you're talking about more of a spiritual, metaphysical sacred space that could live in your soul or in your heart or wherever it might live. Um, but that you also, I believe, have your own sacred space that is part of your creative process. So can you give us a little peek into that creative process a little bit?
um, there is, sorry about that.
Okay.
There is a connection between what we were just talking about and what you're asking me now. I'm going to do my best to see if I can get these words out right. With the song I Am Light, what I've discovered is it taught me something, is what I meant to say. The song I Am Light taught me something about how I see the world. There's a way that I'm wired that I didn't know, where I see things quite often symbolically, and I don't think about the literal sense of certain things. And so even when I think about the song I Am Light, I ended up writing this whole 270-page essay thing that I Am Light ended up being the center of it. I was writing because I was working on what it meant to express big spiritual ideas in a simple way. And writing always helps you hear yourself, helps me hear myself. And then I Am Light ended up being the center of that, surprisingly. And what I learned in that writing is that when we talk about the word light in the spiritual symbolic sense, like you talked about sacred space, we are talking about a certain type of illuminated feeling or illuminated nature. But light is also the opposite of heavy. And when I think about light also, like in that real life sense, you know how the combustion of something gives off a great light? I think about the combustion of our internal processes and our internal issues and our pain and the combustion of the interaction of all that and the light that it gives off. And to me, that's kind of what music, that's exactly what music is for me. It's turning all the combustion of the pain and the struggle of life and processing it all into something that you shine out from yourself.
Mm.
And so when I think about sacred space, it is that thing that you just said, but it also is physical too. And I think what I'm learning for me is that sacred space lives on every level. And so when I do have a physical sacred space, I've been keeping something like that since I was about 19. And I also even travel with that. Even when I'm at hotels and stuff, I just set up a little table with things that are important to me. Is where I go and do my prayers in the morning. And now I've moved from like a really big house down in the South. Houses are cheap in the South for us. And I lived in a 6,000 square foot house because half of it I didn't need, but the other half was perfect house. So that was my house. And I moved from that house in 27. I lived there for 15 years almost. I left it in 2017, and now I live in about maybe 900 square foot condo. And one of my bedrooms is my prayer room. And I have clothes in the bathroom. I have shoes in the oven because this room is going to be my prayer room. So it's something that I just need. And so I do have that. And even also on my writing table, I always keep a little sacred space on my writing table for my songwriting, just a little thing with my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, and my great great aunt, their picture. I just keep it there. But also what I have learned in the music industry has taught me so much because it gives you so much practice with healing yourself from lots of criticism and sexism and racism and painful things and judgment and stuff. It gives you lots of opportunity to heal and work with those things. I have had to learn how to carry a place inside of me that is where I can go. I can just take a breath and sit in the corner and I can go there and get myself back to a centered place because there's always somebody pulling or asking. Sometimes, often, most often, people mean well.
Yeah.
But somebody comes up behind you and taps you and you're freaked out. Where how do you get your nervous system back calm before you go on stage? And so learning how to like manage myself is also a sacred space. And also this quarantine has taught me that I have places that are sacred spaces for me on the planet. When we talk about our love of nature, nature is that's a vast conversation. And for me, there are certain places that truly are sacred space that have healed me so many times. The times I've had the hardest times I've had in my life, Hawaii healed me from that. And I wouldn't just go stay at a hotel. I would go hotel for a couple of days. Then I'd find my rental house. Then I'd go off into nature with some people. Then I'd be in the woods for like 9 days. And my mom would be mad because I'm not calling. And I don't even realize it's been 9 days. But I'm like off in the woods in Hana or something, or in the North Shore of Kauai, and really just being with nature in that really sacred way. And so sacred space means a lot of things to me. At the time when I wrote this song, though, I was living in New York, which is something I never thought I'd do. I thought it was not my style at all, but I was in Hawaii. I just finished recording the album, Songversation, which I Am Light is on. And I prayed a prayer before I went to bed because I knew I was going to be leaving my big house. And I was also living in Seattle at the time, and it felt like Seattle was over. And I prayed a prayer before I went to bed. Where am I going to live next? And I woke up in the morning and sat straight up, which is not my style because I move slow, especially in the morning. And I sat straight up and was like, New York. So I ended up in New York for 4 years. And there's that real active feeling. I lived in Midtown, I lived on the Upper West Side, and I lived in Brooklyn. And, and it's busy outside. and not just what we think New York is, it's also a lot of energy. Like the sidewalks are dirty and there's a lot of stuff for a sensitive person to feel. Smells, a lot of stuff. And but I had a beautiful apartment. It was little and I had a beautiful view, and it was always felt like going from crazy into my sacred space anytime I came inside. And so that too is what the song meant at the time. And my apartment was so small that my physical sacred space was in the coat closet at the front door, because I always have to have one.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's, and we've texted about this a little bit, which has been a fun conversation to have. Um, but I think that there is a general um, way of living in modernity, if you will, that feels very separate from the sacred. It feels very separate from the divine. It's, you know, and I think, that has its roots in Abrahamic religions and the agricultural revolution and all these other kinds of things. But essentially, God moved up into the sky, and here we live in the material physical plane, really separate from all that stuff. And because we don't have great regard for the objects in our life, we treat them as if they're disposable and dispensable. Plastic bottles, Bic lighters, and it's no wonder that there's global warming and climate catastrophe, because we don't value anything here because it's not sacred. Um, and I think that this is, why it is so important to have these sacred spaces. And you mentioned the photos of your grandmother and your great grandmother, that those aren't just disposable physical items that are devoid of the divine. In fact, that is the divine. And we're so used to standardized products. You walk into a Marshalls and there's a dress that looks like just like 900 other dresses or whatever. But it's finding, not that I spent a ton of time in Marshalls, to be honest, but I do have 3 daughters. But to find the parts of life that are unique and interrelated and connected, and I think that can connect us more to a life of divinity, even if we have to go out and toil in what my dad calls dull care, or the world of the 10,000 things, or whatever, just the sidewalk, the gum, like the gum infested sidewalks. But it's interesting. Did you minimalize and simplify on purpose, in this, where you're living now? Was that a purposeful choice of like, oh, I can just not have too much externality in my life and live more like a monk?
You said so many things I want to say,
Sorry.
answer you.
Yeah.
I love talking with you. No, I was not thinking about simplifying. I don't know that I even have. And part of that is because you and I were texting about this, and we were trying to figure out, like, it's such a big thing to text about.
Yeah, I know.
But I have a relationship with a lot of the objects in my life and they are sacred to me. So this picture of my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, my great great aunt. This photograph, I could photocopy it, and it already is a photocopy because my great aunt sent it to me. But like you said, it's not just a thing; it's what the energy it carries for you. And so I have a lot of things that carry special energy for me, things, actual objects. And so a big portion of my apartment is a lot of crystals and jewelry and things I've collected, books, first printing of a Maya Angelou book, and handmade dolls, and just things, objects that are special to me. And so I don't know that maybe some point I will downsize those things, but I'm not living simply. I just downsized. I also wanted to say, because you texted me and asked if I was comfortable sharing this story, and I finally just decided if it comes up, I'll tell it. If it doesn't come up, I won't tell it. But it's coming up now because we're talking about the sacredness of things. And one of the things that, I mean, I guess there's no point in mincing words. One of the things that really bothers me about our contemporary culture is that it feels like more people than not live a life where there's nothing that they hold sacred. There's nothing that they have reverence for, or they're irreverent at the wrong times. It just feels, and it bothers me. And because, I come from a music industry lens, so there's a lot of that in the music industry, as you know. So what you asked me about on the text was something that happened when I held Maya Angelou's, one of her canes. And so I love Seattle. I lived there for several years. But when I was honored to go to Maya's funeral, I met her best friend at the funeral. Her and her best friend were same age, born exactly 1 month apart. Maya was April 4th. Dr. Maxine Mims was March 4th. And so there was the big funeral, then there was like a small after thing. And at the small after thing, she got on stage and said, we were best friends, and told us all about their birthdays. And Dr. Maxine Mims is this very dynamic woman. She's the founder of Evergreen State College. She's 92 now, so Maya would have been 92 as well. And she's stylish and fun to talk to, very wise and beautiful hair. Like, she's fly. I love her. Mm-hmm. And so when she was walking from the stage after she spoke, I put myself in her way. And I was like, I live in Seattle. She said, who lives in Seattle? Like, me. So we kept in touch. And I finally got to go out to her house. She lives outside of Seattle, like an hour drive. And I finally got to go out there in just, was it 2018? 2017. It's my first time getting to go out there. And she is 92 and has had a really dynamic life. So she has all these sacred objects all over her house. And she lives right on the water. She has a really old tree that her deck is built around, like it's a sacred space. And so she has all this stuff. And she said, go on back there and see Maya's canes. And so she had them all in 2 or 3 cane holder, like the umbrella holder type things. And she was like, go ahead and take them out, touch them, whatever you want to do. So I was looking at all of them, touching all of them, holding them, everything. And there was one that I loved that was metal and had like polished gemstones all over it, like the tumbled kind that you see at the health, at the health food store or whatever, and just all over this metal, super intricate silver metal cane. And so that ended up being my favorite one. And so I took it to the mirror that she had in her living room, and I stood there. And actually, I had on this dress, and I had a white wrap, but the wrap was tied different, which is a way that I never tied my wrap. I don't know why I tied it that way that day. I guess, things, how they go, life. And I've been wrapping my hair since I was 15. So to inadvertently just randomly wrap my hair a whole new way is a thing for me. And so I take the cane, I stand in the mirror, and I jumped. And I went, whoa. And Dr. Mim said, what do you see? And I said, I feel like I'm one of y'all. When I look at myself in the mirror, I see that I'm one of y'all. And to me, y'all is like the women who, as they get into their elder status, become the wisdom keepers. But in their younger years, they're the artists and the thinkers and the ones who travel around the world and collect stories and create things and teach people, are artists. And then they take all of that learning into their wisdom years and they become our wisdom keepers and our teachers and our Mayas and our Dr. Mims. And so I looked in the mirror and I yelled out, whoa. And she said, what do you see? And I said, I see that I'm one of y'all. But what I couldn't explain to her was I looked like I was 80. Like, I looked in the mirror. I have a photograph of it. I'm going to send it to you when you get off the phone. You
showed it to me once.
Oh, I did show it to you.
And it is so startling. Your whole face is lined and wizened, yeah. And you're just thicker, and you're old.
Holding the cane.
Yeah, you're just.
Yeah.
I
forgot I showed you the picture.
Yeah, it is so startling because when you first told me the story, it's such a compelling story, just as you told it again. Um, but there's like a little woo-woo detector in me going off, and I'm like, really? And then you showed me the photo, and I'm like, oh my, Jeff, never doubt there's a God, because
Yeah.
um, because that is, yeah, it was startling to see that photo.
It was an
Um,
important moment for me too, because my songwriting partner passed away that night. I was in Seattle to do the show at the Langston Hughes Community Center for Dr. Mims. There's some people, when they ask you to do stuff, you say yes and you go. And so she asked me to do the show. And my songwriting partner also was my guitar player for a long time on the road. Not my whole career, but much of it. But we were songwriting partners. And he wasn't with me because he was already having health issues. And then I got a call that night that he passed away. And so I haven't really assessed all of that and what it all meant, all put together. But there's something important about that day and what I saw in myself, and that he left that day too. There's just something about it. And so
yeah, that
that the
story
idea
for,
of a
yeah.
sacred object, I fully believe that if I did not have that cane in my hand, that I don't know that I would have seen into that portal in that moment, like the sacredness. And also, I just wanted to say too that Dr. Mims said she had all the canes because it was a joke between her and Maya, because Dr. Mims still wears high heels. And Maya told her, "You better stop wearing them high heels. You're gonna mess up your knees and your feet." And because they were in their 80s when Maya passed. And so she said, as a joke or as a final playful nod, she left her all the walking sticks.
That's, well, don't take umbrage if I send you a cane for Christmas or something.
I will not. It will be special to me.
That story for me is so kind of pregnant with symbolism. And I kind of hope that this doesn't put you on the spot, and you can just tell me to screw off if it does.
Okay.
But I mean, there you are holding Maya Angelou's cane, seeing yourself as a wizened old wisdom keeper, doing something at the Langston Hughes Center, which I didn't even know. And to me, that sort of conjures this question, is that, do you feel that it is sort of incumbent upon you in some way to step into the role of the wisdom keeper? I mean, with Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Alice Walker, Maya Angelou, I mean, I can go on. Especially in the African American tradition, where it's been, oh God, so palpable and so precious and important, that work. I mean, you've won Grammys and put out records. You've had a life of incredible achievement. And then where are you kind of along that road, that legacy road in your mind right
So when you use the word incumbent, does that mean that you are the natural next
now?
person to walk into that?
Yeah.
Incumbent means just naturally inherited.
Yeah, like it's that it's almost your, I don't want to say it's your responsibility, but do you feel that that is the kind of natural, in that really original word of meaning of the word natural, next step for your life?
That's why I wanted to specify the words, because we use words, but sometimes we mean different things when we use them. Because I
Mm-hmm.
don't see it as a responsibility necessarily, although we can kind of use incumbent that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see it as a natural next step. Trying to explain it for me, if I just continue, I feel that if I continue to be honest with myself about what my next steps are, that is naturally where I will be and become. These last 2 years is the first time I've seen people see me anything like that way. Because I feel like when I'm speaking, that I'm talking about regular things, But then there are people who are much younger than me or younger than me on their spiritual path, and they're like drinking it up. But so much of that are things that I didn't know when I was in my 20s. I was learning that stuff in my 20s and 30s. And so now things that are normal to me are wisdom for other people. It's just now becoming that. And I feel like as long as I continue to be honest and continue to learn, continue to go where my heart and soul tell me to go, that I think it is just natural for me. But I also think there's a part of me that feels that even if I didn't want that it would be hard to stop it because of the lineage I come from, which is why I keep that picture on my desk all the time. Because the more I learn about myself, the more I realize I naturally do things that are of my lineage. And I come from some very strong, wise, interesting women and female lineage. Male too, but I'm especially connected to my female lineage. And so I feel like if I just keep being me, that I'm going to be like my aunts. And then eventually I'm going to be like my grandmother. And eventually I'll be like my great grandmother. So, but as we know, free will can always mess things up. But I've always been a person who, that's really how I started my spiritual path, because I wanted to know from a higher power what I was supposed to be doing with my life as a whole. And so when I was 19 and 20, I started really asking, like, what do I do? And how do I make the most out of this life? And at that time, what I discovered, which I think was the right thing at that time, was that music is also a generational thing in our family. But it wasn't just about making music. It was about what I was going to make music for and what the intention was and what stories I was going to tell and how I was going to add to the world and to myself. And I think that I know that is why I write the kind of music I write and the subject matter and the stories I tell, because that's why it is a spiritual work for me. Because back then it was something that I felt was presented to me as an option that I said yes to. And so now, where I am now, I'm looking at my options and what I have the opportunity to say yes to, but it's a little bit harder to see because I have this whole developed life. And so is it supposed to be big? Am I supposed to write a bestseller, or am I supposed to just write? Am I supposed to go all around the world and talk to everyone, or do I just talk to the kids at the school on the corner? Like, I'm trying to understand who I am in this time. Yeah. But what I do know is that it still comes from that place of listening and wanting to learn and give.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it that way. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I'm having like right now, just in the world where it is with COVID, and people are in a great place of need and have a lot of fear and anxiety, and it's heavy, and we're all trying to serve every way we can. And every week I write an email that goes out to a lot of people, like 1 million people, and I pour my soul into it, and I put my personal email at the bottom of it, which is probably crazy. And then I spend 2 or 3 days answering every single one of those emails that I get in personally. And I don't know really how long I can do that for, because, right now maybe it's like 500 emails or something. But they're not like, hey, how you doing? That was great. They're like, yeah, here's my life.
Yeah.
And by Tuesday, I'm sort of spontaneously bursting into tears, like a lot of time. Thank God it's Friday that we're doing this, because otherwise it'd be a total wreck. And I've
been spontaneously bursting into tears today. Whole other conversation though.
Well, if it happens, we're in good company. Misery loves company, as they say. And I didn't really understand what I was going through physiologically. And then I got on the call with a friend of mine, Marie Forleo. You might know her. And
I knew Marie. I met Marie at Super Soul.
Oh yeah, right. And she's like, Jeff, you have compassion fatigue. And she's like, this is what, first responders have and other folks. And I'm like, huh?
Oh.
And I'm like, oh.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And she's like, you have to take care of yourself first. This is why first responders burn out in a couple of years because it it's coming in. They're taking so much in. And believe me, I realize my place of privilege in this equation. I'm hardly on the front line. I'm just doing what I can where I am right now. Um, but I guess that was leading me to a question or an observation, because I think, as you said, whether you kind of actively step into that role of teacher of like, I'm going to write the great next, American novel or personal development book or whatever, people already see, they're already projecting their own spiritual journey onto you. That's already happening. And I wonder if what your experience is like with that. Does that feed you or drain you, or some form of combination of both? Just holding that much space for people.
I am shaking my head as you're speaking because I don't get to have this conversation a lot with people. Um, because I don't think, unless you are a person who has like that, um, for lack of better words, invisible interaction with millions of people, unless you have it, you don't know anything. You don't even know it exists. You don't even know like that there's an energy that exists. So when I became in the public eye, I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know that that was a thing, that the invisible exchange. I also didn't know that it was going to be this big, or that there would be millions of people who listened to my music and had emotional responses and projections. I didn't know at all. And I feel like the first 10 years, there was this way that it affected me physiologically that I just never knew what to attribute it to. Because I would think, why am I always so tired? like everybody else gets up and goes to breakfast and they talk and they're dressed at breakfast time. And to me, it was just like confounding how people could have that type of energy. And so also I also learned that I'm also just a very sensitive person. And so not only was I having that invisible relationship, but I'm also very sensitive to everything anyway. I didn't know either of these things about myself. And so this last 10 years, from around 2009, was a really pivotal moment in my life. So from 2009 to today, a big part of my spiritual practice has become how to continue to nourish myself, given everything that I take on and everything that I give. And sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't. But it's a big part of my life, learning how to keep myself healthy inside of all of it. And there is a part of it that feeds me, because it's hard to take it personal, though.
Yeah.
When somebody says you did this, it's like, I didn't. I am listening to my spirit and listening to God and translating my feelings. And you did something for me by listening to me. And then when they say that I did something for them, then I just think, thank you, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also there's more of an energy exchange than just a thank you. There's the thing that goes on. And so it's really cool, forgive me for like such a small word, but it's really cool for somebody to say those things. And so my mind is like, ooh, love it. But we know our minds are the least of what needs to be running our lives. So my mind likes it. My body and my energy body is like holding more than I know how to handle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even in my relative to how much you have to hold, even in my small way, sometimes I'll get, response and I'm like, whoa, I don't want that responsibility.
Yeah.
It's scary to me to have that
Yeah.
responsibility because I'm not even
Yeah.
sure I can handle this corporeal being right here. I'm just barely
Yeah.
hanging on sometimes.
Same. This quarantine showed me how much I have lacked routine my whole adult life. And so of course it's like, of course people who have more routine life have more of an option to make sure they take their vitamins, make sure they work out consistently. And it was like, it was spirit was talking to me, and it was like saying stuff like, of course you haven't been properly nourished over the course of your adult life. You haven't had that consistent wake up, go to bed thing. And so I'm trying to manage regular things, like just how to get minerals in and regular things. And so when I get those stories, my mind loves it. I don't know how to handle it all.
Yeah. I'm wondering right now, I keep referring to this time kind of jokingly as a forced monasticism, because for many people, the reality is doing a lot more with less, kind of less externality, whether that's something as simple as takeout food or just less money, to be honest. Less friends, less social interaction. I mean, most of it happening on Zoom. Um, and in a way, I think it's very scary for people, but it's also monks go out to, ashrams and caves and, for a reason, to essentially strip away all those externalities to do real deep personal inventory. Like Michael Beckwith said something to me 4 or 5 months ago. He's like, I think he said, loneliness is a loneliness with yourself. And, what he's kind of referring to is that we can be amongst a whole group of people and still feel lonely if we don't self-love, if we don't feel worthy, we can still feel lonely. And we're always kind of projecting a version of ourselves that, we think it's going to get the approval of others to fit in. And I think, this particular time has forced people to kind of deal with a lot of with themselves, and we're just not trained to deal with ourselves. Our mind isn't, unless we're good meditators. So I wonder what this experience has been like for you. Have you been alone a lot, or how you doing?
I I have been alone a lot. But I also was craving being alone a lot after 2018 and 2019. And I tried to design some alone time at the top of the year, and it went horribly awry. Whole other conversation. Like, I was setting up the space and I was like, I'm going to stay inside. And then this lamp falls off the shelf. Glass goes everywhere and it shocked me. And I'm like shocked, and the thing is buzzing and I have to run and unplug it. And I just think maybe I'm trying to do something that's not what I need. I sat on the couch. I left all the glass there for a few hours. I just sat on the couch. It's like, let me just, all right, maybe it's not time for all that deep diving and trying to make it something it's not. And so when this happened, I felt like, first of all, when the lamp fell and everything that happened after that, I was like, this is about to be an interesting year. Because right after that, the whole thing with Iran happened, and then Kobe's passing and all the 7 people in the helicopter. And I had some personal stuff. And so I was like, wow, interesting year. But then who knew that this whole COVID-19 thing was going to happen? And so now that we're quarantining, it's actually feeding a urge, a craving, a need. It's feeding a need that I had to spend some time really alone. Really, like when you said monastic, I giggled because I'm like, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So I've been enjoying all this time, using it to the utmost. Because I do a lot of interviews as a musician and stuff, and people say, what do you like to do? And I never know how to explain to people that what I really love to do is contemplate. I love to just sit somewhere and just let my mind wander and go deep into those thoughts and let it guide me to a book or guide me to a thing that I want to write. Or I love it. I love it because I have such a big external life. I love having that big internal life. I love it and I need it. And so I know what to do with alone time. I know exactly how to be with myself. And so I've been able to go even deeper into that. I've had some uncomfortable moments with it, but I'm comfortable with that too, because I'm used to having uncomfortable moments with myself. And so it hasn't been anything I'm not used to. It hasn't been anything I didn't need at this time. The only discomfort is like when you go deep into that place, you can also feel everyone else deeper. And so feeling all the collective pain and fear, and it's wild. But I feel that often anyway. because I get those letters like you and those stories from people. And I know how hard, how dark being human can get, because I things I never would have thought about that people tell me.
Yeah.
So, but I'm used to feeling that heaviness and the darkness. It's just, that's been the downside or the flip side of this alone time, and like all the deepening and the quietness and all the meditations I've been able to do, and the writing and the thinking. So I'm having a nice experience with myself. I am ready to travel though, because some of my most sacred moments are out in nature, and I miss that.
Yeah.
And I want to see my niece, because the kids grow up so fast. So I miss seeing her too, but I'm okay.
Yeah. It's funny. My girls, speaking of,
They just came in.
they just came in. So I'll tell you about this. That's actually a great little funny segue. And they're looking at me askance. They're like, "Dad, when are you going to be finished up?"
My phone's about to die too, just FYI.
Okay.
Let me
Well,
know if this speakerphone doesn't sound good.
well, I'll just finish. We can just finish with this. Is that, I think we've all had to kind of dig deep. Oh, I think you're frozen.
I am. Hold on. Sorry. I was trying to put you on speaker so I can hear you, because I had to plug my phone in. Sorry, Jeff. Hold on.
No, you're
Are you
good.
talking?
Yeah. I can actually hear you. Perfect.
And I can't hear you, and that's the problem.
Okay, it's all right. I'll keep talking. I
Yes.
will. Okay, there we go. Yes. So, my girls are in school, and they're bouncing off the walls a little bit. So, my middle child Lolly is a devoted dancer. She loves to dance, and my little pipsqueak Micah has become her student. And every day in this room, Lolly becomes the taskmaster, and for 2 hours without fail, they never miss a day, she teaches my little one how to dance, and they just are religiously devoted to it, and it has just been like the most precious thing to watch.
I love it. So they're like, "Get out of our studio."
Yeah, they're looking at me like, "Dad, come on, hurry it up here." Yeah, I guess, the last thing I would say is, I was sick for a chunk of this quarantine, which was uncomfortable just from an anxiety perspective, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And I started getting into this dude, Muji. I don't know if you know this guy, Mooji.
I do, yeah.
And he's just become my go-to thing. And when I was really kind of very sick, I was doing maybe like 2 hours a day with Muji, just on YouTube, and but it like blew me to a whole nother place. And so sometimes, there are these times in life that seem really uncomfortable, but that turn out to be these inflection points of tremendous growth. And I've heard you talk about that too. And it's just always a reminder that when we're there, when we're at rock bottom, there is a brighter day ahead.
I think that's also a wonderful way to regard this stillness, because a lot of people have an issue being still, because when you get still, you start to feel your stuff. But it's like, as soon as you do, the fear of the stuff you've been hiding from doesn't last long. For me, I can say some of the hardest things I've been through, and I had to just stop and look at my shadow, my dark stuff, and it lasts a week, literally. And I'm like, okay, what do I do next? Who do I call? Okay, so I need to call this person and talk to. It's never as scary as you think. And once you have that first experience of facing that darkness inside of yourself, then you realize you can do it again in other areas of your life. And so I don't fear stillness. And I think that my prayer is that there are people in this world who had to go through this time of forced monasticism, like you call it, but that they come out realizing that their shadow was nowhere near as scary as they thought it was. Because people like that are more potent in the world because you are able to say no to things and yes to things and try things and love bigger because you're not afraid of the darkness, as afraid. So that's
That's
been the
beautiful.
favorite thing about my life, and I hope more people can get that too.
That's beautiful. It's so funny. It's anytime I ever sense any reluctance from you to become that wisdom holder, I just realize you're already there. You know? Like
Thank you.
I was listening to a message that you sent me. I think I told you when I was walking through the hills here in Topanga, and it was the resonance of your voice as much as anything you said. And you know, I disappeared. It was only the world, you know. And of course, that's the goal of any spiritual practice, is to find that sense of self transcendence. You know, what you found on, you know, mountaintops in Hawaii. You know, sometimes we just get a glimpse of it, and that's all we get. Um, but it's beautiful. I'm very grateful um, for my burgeoning relationship with you. You've inspired me and given me a lot to live for. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you too, because today gave me a chance to practice something important, because I am just very sensitive and I feel a lot and go through stuff, and I feel it deeper than it seems a lot of people around me do. And so because I have such a public life and such a private one, very often it'll be the wrong time publicly, but I will have to retreat. And today I'm pushing through like some physical pain in my body.
Mm.
And I just thought, Jeff is a safe place to do this. Like if I start hurting and I just go, ow, and I go, I have to go, he'll understand.
I will
And
always
so
understand.
thank you for giving me a chance to practice showing up even when it's hard, because I didn't feel any pain during this conversation. So now I can go back and lay on my heat pad and chill.
Oh man. All right. Well, if you need any physiotherapy, I know a lot of people. How's that?
Do I? I know you know everybody.
Yeah. All right. Thank you,
Thank
India.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Love you. Take care.
Love you too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Ciao.